Hi, I'm Mallory. I'm the CEO of Lacuna Loft, and this is our second speaker series talk. Lacuna Loft is a nonprofit organization offering support programs for young adult cancer patients, survivors, and caregivers. We are really excited about this program. This is the second in the series of talks, and I'm really honored to welcome Kim as our speaker. So Kim, take it away.
Hi. So I wanted to share my story with Lacuna Loft because I think it's a great platform, and I think the more people who hear stories, the less they will feel alone. So this is part of my story. With cancer so pervasive in our culture, I have found that people usually have one of two views. The first being those who believe that cancer is terminal upon diagnosis, or you have the second, those who believe cancer to be curable because after all, this is the 21st century. Yet when that diagnosis hits you, everything you thought you knew disappears into the abyss with a six-letter word. For me, I thought remission would mean that cancer would be over. I now know that no matter how much time passes, cancer will never not be. This is not to negate the fact that remission and cures do occur, or to say that the world still revolves around cancer as it did for nearly 3 years. For me, it is simply a reality that I have come to reason with. We, my family and I, can never go back to a time when cancer wasn't in our lives. Milestones come and go, and although I am apprehensive that a recurrence may occur, I too indulge in celebrating. Because quite honestly, there were many times that I never thought those occasions would occur. Treatments happened, scans were done, and a bone marrow transplant was had. It is because of those things that my sister no longer actively has cancer. But I know that with cancer, nothing is ever a guarantee. Cancer is something that is always going to be there. It is a fresh memory, sometimes fleeting thought, and something that I often worry will become ever present in our lives once again. When she was diagnosed, it took time for the gravity of the situation we were facing to sink in, just as it has taken time to adjust to life after cancer. A constant state of flux has perpetually existed since the summer day in 2014. Above all else, I now fully understand that cancer has changed my life forever. So then the question that I think I have posed to many, and many may pose to me after reading the above, is what it is that you are supposed to do. While the answers probably vary for people, it is simple for me. You live. You do what cancer fights so hard to squander. You make the absolute most of every single day, and you keep perspective as to what is most important. You rationalize those fleeting thoughts of fear with the facts. You try and push away the persisting anxiety that fights so hard to settle inside of you, and you try not to grant cancer any more time than it has already stolen away from you. You do not overthink all the things that you want most in life. You cherish the memories, and you do your best to add to that archive on the daily. You focus on the now, what is, and not what has happened or what you worry may someday will happen. You take in all the little things and all the big just the same. I've experienced life vastly differently than I would have without a life with cancer. I am an entirely different person than I once was. Cancer has provided me with an incredibly unique perspective that I didn't know I would have in life. At 26, I better value time and have a deeper appreciation for the present moment. So my advice is to live life in the moment, because tomorrow is never promised, and you are here today.
We have some questions now that have been submitted by the greater Lacuna Loft audience. This is one of my favorite parts. So we'll kind of launch right into like a question and answer. Let's see. What did your process of learning to live post-cancer look like? Because I know you come from the caregiving perspective compared to the survivor perspective, which is super important. And so, what did that process kind of look like?
So for me, this one's hard because it's a question that I get asked a lot, and I'm always cautious when I try and give this answer, because I don't think there's a formula that exists or a blueprint that everyone can follow for having cancer. It's just something that is so different for everyone. But for me, I utilized friends to help me cope and to gain perspective, because when you're going through it, it's really hard to have that perspective. I sought professional help. I found a phenomenal therapist that I really clicked with, just to deal with the issues that I set aside in favor of my sister, because prioritizing was always her, and to change that back to being my own person again has been really important post-cancer.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because when you're caregiving, there's like, you have your slew of complications and worries and issues, and some of those can be shared with the person going through cancer treatment, and some of them can't. And so finding outlets is like a must, and kind of a complicated thing to learn. So that's great. How long did it take you to feel like you were out there living again?
So I think this is a feeling that comes and goes. I think it's not a feeling that just happens or something that a switch can be flipped on. So for me, I met my late fiance a few months into my sister's cancer journey, and there were many times with him that it felt like I was being normal or living again. Going to concerts, spending time with friends, and just spending more days outside of the hospital than in the hospital created that feeling of normal. Some days, even now, are hard and you feel like you're struggling because what was can't be what is now, and so it's hard. But I think life in general is made up of really small moments that form a beautiful adventure, and we fight so hard to get to that moment when really I think we should be striving to be happy. So for me, my happiness and finding that again and realizing what that meant is how I think getting out there and living life again fell into place for me.
Mm-hmm. And then kind of piggybacking on that, what tips or tricks did you use to start living again after your sister's diagnosis that you could suggest to someone else?
I think there's a lot that I wish that I had known. So it's definitely something that I like sharing. Um, the most important one for me is that it can be two things at once. And it has been a very important word for me with cancer. It took a lot of time for me to absorb and grasp the situation and realize that I could very possibly lose my sister. I had a lot of guilt for a long time, but my breakthrough came when I realized that I could care for her and I could care for myself and live my own life. That realization came quite late for me, and I'm very lucky that it did happen. But the word and, it's only 3 letters, but it's so significant with cancer because your loved one has cancer and you can live your life. And that is a huge one for me.
So do you think that the tips and tricks that a caregiver might use are different than the tips and tricks that a survivor might use?
I think absolutely. I think when you look from my sister's perspective, I think her tips are very different than mine. As far as hers, it's just the tangible of, getting out of bed after cancer, that cancer is not always there. You live with cancer for so long, and then you suddenly don't have it. And she almost went through this grieving process, which was that was who she was before cancer. She grieved while she had cancer, and now that she doesn't have cancer, she's almost grieving the person she was during cancer. And I think as a caregiver, when I initially found out she had cancer, I wanted to run in the other direction. Like it took me a long time to realize what I wanted to be and who I wanted to be. And I think moving on and getting past her diagnoses has been almost like breathing again. So I think they're very different.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I think it's probably similar for a caregiver, but like you said, the tips and tricks are different. But there's a pre-person, there's a during person, and then like an after person, and kind of figuring out what each of those personas wants and needs. That's interesting. That's a really good point. I've never heard it worded that way.
I mean, I think it's almost like it is almost like grieving because you were one person and then you were a totally different person, and you're the same person and a lot of you stays the same, but to go through cancer, I don't think one cannot change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. How did you take back control after your sibling's diagnosis? Because I know for both caregivers and survivors, just that loss of control can be one of the biggest things to combat. And so I'm wondering how you kind of took back the reins.
Yeah, so I think this is a little different for me than I think even caregivers, because I was my sister's power of attorney through her cancer. So as far as tangible control, I had a lot of it. Obviously, cancer is uncontrollable, so I also didn't have a lot of it. The taking back control of my own life was not overnight for me. In a lot of ways, I was actually quite resistant because it was normal to be in this situation as a caregiver. And so letting go was, I suppose, kind of my grieving process. That being said, it was really important for me. I did it by removing myself as her caregiver. I went back to work. I spent more time focused on me. I moved out of the home, so we don't live together anymore. In doing so, I made the choice to focus on me and put myself first as opposed to putting her first, and just kind of controlling my own life and realizing that we were two separate people. Because while that's true, being someone's caregiver and spending so much time with them, you do kind of get enmeshed. And so I did it by physically removing myself from that situation.
Yeah. So do you think that you have the process of learning to live life after cancer figured out, or is it something that kind of continues to evolve?
I think it always continues to evolve. I don't think one ever stops evolving in life because life is always changing. As for having it all figured out, no. I think it's a constant work in progress. Life is ever changing and we're always striving to adapt. I know that my life changes all the time. I'm by no means an expert, but it's something that I do continue to work on and practice. I don't think if someone asked me in 10 years if I had it all figured out, that my answer would be yes, because I just think it's always changing. And who I am is always changing. And so I think in some ways, yes, by realizing that it's kind of all figured out, but I don't think anyone really has it all together all the time.
Yeah, that would be awesome though, wouldn't it?
It would be really awesome, but I think life is supposed to be spontaneous and there's only so much we can control. And so by letting go, I think that actually has helped me a lot in just letting go and going with what is has really helped me through cancer.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are all the questions I have, Kim. Do you have anything else that you kind of want to share with the audience?
I think everyone needs to figure out their own thing with cancer. I think moving on post-cancer, people look for answers, and I think you can definitely take advice from other people, but I think go with your gut and follow your heart. And I think that's probably the most important thing that you can do, not just with cancer, but with anything. And I just think it's important. We look to others so often, and I think looking within is probably the best thing that one could do.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think too, on top of that, like realizing that being a caregiver as a young adult is really hard. And
it's the hardest thing I have ever done.
Yeah. And just, I think just that realization can be very helpful. Just like, give yourself a little pat on the back sometimes because it's tough.
It's kind of odd for me because when she was diagnosed, I never thought of myself as a caregiver, and it's a role that I took because of both circumstance and because I was so scared. I just never thought that I could be anywhere but next to her, and then it turned into caregiving, and then it turned into something so different. And there was a point through it when I was like, oh my God, I never thought that it would last for 3 years. And when she actually found out she was in remission, they came in to tell her, and they told her, and she didn't understand what that meant. And I think she was just so shocked. And I broke down crying, and that's super rare for me. But it was almost this burst of relief, which was like, holy crap, we did it. And it's so weird now to even think of myself as a caregiver, because for me, I did what I thought was right as a sister. And that doesn't mean anyone who didn't choose the role did something wrong. So it's still a strange title to carry.
Yeah. I appreciated the use of we too in your last answer, the we did it. Because I had peer groups who, between me and my husband was my primary caregiver, and who just didn't understand. I would say like, we have chemo today and we have blah, 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 and people would tease me about it. And it's like, nope, you just don't understand. This is definitely a we situation, whether that's a spouse or a sibling or a parent.
Oh, it's absolutely a we situation. I mean, we is something that I used in the very beginning because I never wanted my sister to feel like she was alone. I didn't want it to be like, you have cancer, you have chemo. That's incredibly overwhelming for someone. And so as a family, it was a we. And as my siblings didn't cope as well or the same as I did, and my parents had business obligations, it became a we. We were going to chemo. We were getting admitted to the hospital. We were going through a bone marrow transplant. I mean, I never wanted her to feel like she was walking this road alone. Because if I were the patient, I wouldn't want to walk it alone. It takes an incredible support team, even outside of a caregiver, friends, family, people who care, nurses, to get through cancer. It's by no means an I or a you. I think it's absolutely a we.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, thank you so much, Kim, for talking with me today. I love having a caregiver perspective in our speaker series. I think it's so important, and this was a fabulous topic. So thank you so much for sharing.
You are very welcome.